If all companies have to meet the needs of a changing population, they also have to make some changes in their leadership. That's the logic behind a project to encourage more inclusion of women and people of color on corporate boards. The project includes the event series Get Connected and the recent list of best examples called the GK15. To tell us about the project is our guest, the president and CEO of Colette Phillps Communications. Colette Phillps, thank you very much for being with us, Colette.
Yes, it's nice to be back, Chris.
First of all, talk about the logic of inclusion, because what all these companies are doing, because I look at some of the companies on this board and saying a high-tech company up in the North Shore someplace needs to be diverse. And at first, a lot of our viewers might be saying, well, why?
Why? Well, because our world is changing. When you think about, for example, if you didn't even think about domestically, if you're a global company, the emerging markets in the world are China and India. And so if you truly want to be competitive in the marketplace and to see this as not a feel-good situation, but certainly a business imperative, then you need to have a corporate board and a leadership team that reflects the demographics globally and domestically.
Well, just talk about the lesson learned this week by United Airlines. Now, we think of this as mainly, flying Americans around the world. We had an incident. I think most of the people in that plane were probably white, but there was one man, Asian or Asian American, and what happened to him looked so terrible that now there's a big problem in China.
Exactly. So there is the point, that whatever happens here in the United States gets picked up. When we see what happened with the African American men and women who have been victims of law enforcement, it impacts people who live in the Caribbean, who are black, people who live in Africa, people who live in Europe who are black. So it's not just the United States. Today we live in a digital world, and everything we do becomes our digital footprint. Whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, the world sees whatever happens right there in real time.
And of course, people are using cell phones to get a ride with Uber. Then they read something about what parental leave is like for women.
Exactly. So I think that, I feel like too often we look at the world when it comes to diversity and inclusion from the perspective of the glass being half empty. And so every year on the anniversary of Get Connected, our networking event, we choose to spotlight and shine our light on the companies, the individuals, the institutions who are doing something to really move the dial for diversity and inclusion. And this year we decided to look at companies and their boards. And we just didn't want to do the one and done. We thought, what if we push the envelope a little bit and look at companies that had more than 50% of their board of directors being women and people of color. And I have to tell you, Chris, even me was pleasantly surprised that there were 15 companies, and we actually threw an extra company in there because they were so close. They were like 47.6%. And that company was East Boston Savings Bank. And we decided they deserve to be recognized. So we included them. And we had this, as you said, this company up on the North Shore in Burlington. And you would think, why? And they had the highest, Avid Technology, they had the highest diverse levels. 75% of its board were women and people of color. And by no surprise, the CEO happens to be a Latino. So when you have a diverse management team, it sets the tone for how others view the company. And so I applaud them for really raising the bar for themselves and for other corporations.
Well, if I had one prejudice about technology is that it's dominated by white males. So how does a tech company get outside that box?
Well, I think what they do is they reach outside the box. You know, we tend to, if you think about it, go for the people we are most comfortable with. And if you're not socializing, if you're not interacting, if you are not having friendships with people who look differently than yourself, chances are when it comes time to put somebody on your board, when it comes time to think about hiring somebody, the natural instinct is for us to go to our immediate network. And if that network doesn't include women and people of color, then you're going to end up with a board and a management team that is mostly or all white males.
Now, I know a bank might want to really go with the brand of investing in this local area, so I guess obviously diversity is important to them. But what about a company like GE? Because I think they're one of the better examples.
Well, they are a global company, and they're smart enough to recognize that in today's environment, they need to have a board that reflects the global marketplace in which they do business. So 50% of their board, and I was pleasantly surprised by that, are women and people of color.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Colette Phillps about diversity in business leadership. Colette, what about some of the consequences of this, not just for keeping customers happy and making money, but I guess one of the things that people have said about Boston sometimes not too favorably is that when it comes to a pipeline of opportunity for people of color and even women maybe, we're not doing so great. How does this affect that? This kind of leadership?
Well, I think this kind of leadership helps a company think about how do we fill the pipeline so that we have people that we are grooming and sort of bringing to the next level of a C-suite so that they too can go on to become a CEO or a COO. But you have to be willing. Here in Boston, for example, we are the Mecca of education. We are the Athens of education in this country. And we have 250,000 students who come to this region every year. And yet we don't seem to retain as many of the students of color that we should. And I think that it is because people have this perception that Boston is not a friendly place for people of color. And I think companies who will tell you there is empirical evidence that shows companies that have diverse teams, diverse boards, diverse management team outperform their competitors by 2.3%. Not to mention that you are leaving significant dollars on the table. Black, Latinos, and Asians in this country are a $4 trillion market. They are a very lucrative, what I like to refer to as a domestic foreign market. So if you're a smart company, you want to get a slice of those dollars. And therefore, it is in your enlightened self-interest to think about, how do I reach these people? Well, you reach them by having a workforce that reflects the marketplace and having a board that can advise you how to do that efficiently and effectively.
Try to put this into perspective, at least over time. Have you really sensed that things have changed that much over the years, or are we just seeing a sudden spurt of inclusion?
Well, I think things have changed. I mean, you know, change comes slowly, and especially when, you know, people do not like to get out of their comfort zone. But even here in Boston, you know, you think about it, and the last time we had a mayoral race, we had half of the people who ran for mayor in 2013 were people of color. And that tells you we are now people like to say a minority majority city. I think that's an oxymoron. We are a majority city made up of people of color. And so if you are a party, a political party, a politician, and you want to be successful in Boston, you need to be able to reach out and engage with diverse voters, diverse residents, diverse people.
You found 15 companies that are more or less exemplary.
Yes.
How do you feel about that figure? I mean, do you think it's big enough, or do you think?
Well, it's never going to be big enough. But what I think is good about this is that these companies outpace the national statistics by almost 30%. So they become the bar, the examples that other companies who want to think about diversifying their board can look to, can call up the CEO, the chairman of the board, say, tell me, how did you guys do this? And when it comes to diversity and inclusion, I would say patience is not only a virtue, it is a profitable virtue.
And of course, one other example is in pharmaceutical companies. And I stands to reason that at least half of what's sold is consumed by women. So
absolutely. And not only that, for clinical trials, you need to know whether your medication is going to work across the board on different ethnic groups. Because if you only have one set of people in your demographics for clinical trials, then you're not quite sure that those trials are going to work across the board for African Americans, for Latinos, for Asian. So it makes sense. Or for women, if you're doing something on heart disease, women and men react differently, even when they're having a heart attack. The symptoms are different. So it makes good business sense.
of course, the other way businesses exert leadership is, well, almost at a national political level. And given the national political climate we're experiencing right now, how important is that?
Oh, unbelievably important. When you think about it, 54% of white educated women voted for Donald Trump. Think about what the difference that might have been had those women voted for Hillary Clinton. And you look at the demographics, even though our current president's administration does not reflect the demographics, I think you're going to see more and more when you look at how women have come out, how people of color have come out. People are no longer willing to stand in the shadows. They want to be heard, and they want to flex their political muscles, and they're going to do that. I really believe that in 2018 and 2020.
Well, finally, if people want to find out more about what's happening in the future with Get Connected, is there a way they can check that out?
Yes, they could go to www.getconnectedwithak.com.
As in GK. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
Colette Phillps.